This is probably going to be a long video, but I think I needed to talk about this because there's just so much to talk about, and it's really annoying me how the narrative that's being pushed by the mainstream is just complete and utter bullshit. But for starters, this is coming from someone who had a Patreon a long time ago, and I completely hated it. I'd done it per video, and I never really felt my content was worth what I was taking in donations, and it made me feel pretty guilty about taking the money. So I eventually deleted my account at a time when the site was trying to change its donation system. I remember that, and that harmed a lot of content creators, so I had an excuse to actually delete the account, and I was kind of relieved. I don't need your money. I've got a job, I've got an income, and that is enough for me. But this is not a video about me. This is a video about Sargon of Akkad. So, if you're not familiar with him, and what rock have you been living under for the past, 5 years, he's a big YouTube anti-social justice type. Got taken down from Patreon in the past couple weeks. So, he was banned for this.
See, look, this is what I mean about the chat. I just can't be bothered to deal with people who treat me like this. It's really annoying. You are acting like a bunch of just so you know. You act like white Exactly how you describe black people acting is the impression I get dealing with the alt-right.
So this was a stream that he did about a year or so ago now. And he was banned for the use of racial slurs under Patreon's hate speech policy. So let's get a couple things straight first. No, just because he was throwing slurs at white nationalists doesn't make this okay. I can understand an attempt at using their own logic and bigotry against them as some kind of refutation of it, and this is what Sargon says he's trying to do. But, an attempt at subverting their bigotry and, using it against them. But there's two problems with applying this defense to what Sargon did. Number one, his subversion kind of failed. I could go on for a long time about how this occurred and why Sargon just doesn't know how to engage with white nationalists because he desperately wants to appeal to them in a manner that's just not going to happen. But at the end of the day, he sounded completely ridiculous, and his insults didn't hurt any white nationalist fifis, because it was just too funny for them to see him whine like this. And second though, it wasn't even an attempt at subverting their racism and trying to, go against racism. He wasn't fighting that. Going back to that desperate desire to appeal to white nationalists, that was what he was really wanting to get out of this. He wants these types as an ally in his culture war, and hates fighting on two fronts. That's why he constantly goes back to goes and chickens out of fighting against the alt-right. It's every single time he does this because he doesn't really want to fight them. He sees them as potential allies and wants them to be friends. So that rant wasn't about how their ideas were shit and why they should stop being racists. It was that they should stop being mean to him online, and he tried to sound more racist so that they would like him more. So it failed. But let's get back to that hate speech policy. Don't get me wrong, even as an anti-fascist YouTuber who goes against the alt-right, it's actually pretty difficult for me on YouTube and social media. I have to be pretty damn careful about how I quote alt-righters and respond to them because I know they have a penchant for mass flagging. As I explained above, this is not Sargon's problem, and anyone saying he was banned for insulting Nazis really doesn't understand this situation. Even then, it's not the only time he's throwing around racial slurs. So honestly, he could have been banned for Patreon with this video too.
It's not acceptable to call me a
Why would you begin our conversation like that? It kind of makes me think that you want the internet to open up with a big bunch of memes on your ass, calling you a It's not personal, no one really thinks you're a It's just that you've turned around and said, it's not acceptable to call me a and no one fucking knows you, dude. You're wearing a suit and tie. No one thinks you're like some gangster or anything. It's not like this is a really pertinent conversation to me. But if this video carries on like it does, I'm going to have a real hard time not posting deliberately offensive content because I know people like you are going to get offended. Ah, look what you've made me do. Look, if you hadn't provoked me, if you had just kept your whore mouth shut, I wouldn't be putting a picture with the words gay from outer space over your face.
It's not acceptable to call me a
Yeah, okay, but it's not like I'm walking down the aisles of my local grocery store and I see a spick and go, hey, spick. Hey, spick. You know, I don't know you. I don't really want to talk to you. I don't need to get your attention by calling you a spick. I don't even know why you would bring this up. What's the deal? But anyway, as with the previous guy, I won't call him an and I won't call you a spick. That's what I agree to.
to call me a
Aha! Ha 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 ha! You lose! It's actually fine. It's actually just fucking fine, and I'll tell you why. Because Asians are privileged. In almost every walk of life, Asians make more money, they have better results, and they do better in life than me, just a dumbass cracker. So, fuck off, It's okay for me to call you this, because racism is power plus prejudice. I don't have the power in this situation, the do.
To call me a
Oh, fuck off, you That's not racial discrimination.
It's not acceptable to call me a
I totally agree. Absolutely unacceptable. How dare you?
It's not acceptable to call me a
You know what? Fair enough. You can't change that you're a and it's not very nice for me to call you a What are you talking about? Oh, well, great job trivializing minority slurs. You
Yes, he called a child with Down syndrome a retard and really racially abused an Asian woman just to be edgy on the internet. Not to mention the whole other slew of slurs he throws in there. It just was not a good video. And this one was on his main channel. He really doesn't have a leg to stand on with this bullshit. So when people are saying, oh yeah, he was banned for something that wasn't on his channel, well, yeah, he's also done the shit on his channel. And at the end of the day, he wasn't banned unfairly. He's broken their terms of service, and they weren't scouring his content to search for minor infractions, he was just snitched on. We'll get to who by later. So he was banned for breaking rules. I'm not entirely against. Content moderation is absolutely nightmarish for someone like me, and at the end of the day though, it keeps a lot of the people that it's trying to moderate in check as well. I remember everything before late 2016, and it was an absolute hell for dealing with the alt-right. It would be every other week that they would have raids of like 50 to 100 quote tweets from groypers or whatever preceded them. And I can deal with that. Like, come the fuck at me. I eat that shit for breakfast. But most people can't deal with that. Most people hate that. Especially when they're going around like harassing normies and innocents who just don't know how to deal with this. Especially when like it's young women who've like they've got some nudes out somewhere and they go and find those and start posting those around. It's just like these guys are really they were nasty as fuck. And those don't really happen anymore. Because the kinds of people who used to lead that stuff have been banned so many times, they've either given up and or they've lost a lot of their active followers. And they have to watch what they say as well. So even if it does feel like it's less than I do, they're still being kept in check somewhat. So these rules do make social media less toxic. They're effectively chemotherapy for these sites. Yes, the harassers are the cancer. People who are just a little bit too edgy and trip the automated systems by like joking about stabbing their friend or whatever. That's the hair. That's the hair loss from chemotherapy, and like people who are actually like fighting harassers or like arguing with alt-righters and stuff like that, and they get banned. They're basically the immune system being damaged by the chemotherapy. That's a good example, a good analogy for all of this. However, let's get into like the individual case of Sargon. I've got to be honest. When I first heard the news, I was actually kind of sad about it. As much as I hate his politics, he's not someone I have any true ill will towards, and I don't care about destroying his career. I don't like actively want to do that. It doesn't sound like he needs much help in that effort, but either way. But honestly, I did feel bad for him. It's coming up to Christmas. This was his main source of income, and he has a family to provide for. His income being gone is going to make life really hard for him. He might find a viable alternative, and it's going to give a chunk of it back, but it's never going to be the same again. And as much as the downfall of Sargon at this point is an inevitability, I'm kind of concerned by what will replace that power vacuum on YouTube, because that will happen. There will be a vacuum of content when Sargon does eventually sort of peter out. And yeah, that kind of worries me, because something worse could fill that. As much as I wouldn't really give a shit if he wasn't banned, I understand why he was, and I don't really have a strong enough argument against these systems to start demanding Patreon let him back on. It's their site. If they don't want to fund this kind of stuff, that's their prerogative. And or if they don't want to act like they're giving special treatment to certain people and like actively refusing to enforce their terms of service for specific people, yeah, they kind of have to do it in that sense. So, how were Patreon notified? Despite Sargon and his cronies telling you that they were scouring his content and online appearances, searching for something to ban, that wasn't what happened. He was snitched on, and we know who did it, and so does he. See, we knew exactly where to look when finding evidence of this too. When Sargon originally found out his Patreon was taken down, his initial reaction privately, not publicly, was it was Ethan Ralph and his cronies, which it turned out it was. A pastebin of evidence that was used to flag him was organised by people in Ethan Ralph's Discord server, the Spy Club. And one of the people who was pushing it around a lot was Negro Joe, someone that Ralph has regularly had on his show and has tried to run interference for accusations of flagging on his servers before. So, yeah, this was definitely a Ralph op. The pastebin has them pose as a group of anti-racist left-wingers, and they found the clips of Sargon throwing around the racial slurs to use that against him. Sargon knew this, and he understood that this was an attack on him from the far right, but because he's a myopic idiot, he thought he would stand a better chance of picking a fight with Patreon, and making out that he was a victim of a witch hunt by the evil leftists there, than attack the far-right trolls who've been fucking with him and everyone else in this YouTube sphere non-stop for the past few years. He would rather pussy out and pretend he was a victim of an evil left-wing witch hunt against him than be honest. And that would only be disappointing if I had any higher expectations. And the saddest part is that everyone fucking bought it. Even, like, Sam Harris wrote this explanation of why he's coming off of Patreon, and he's like, yeah, he probably broke the TOS, but I feel like this was bias. Literally, facts over feels. This is how the internet is run. Like, the feels over facts people are complete liars. And this wasn't a witch hunt. He did what he was banned for. He just doesn't like that it was a bannable offence, which is a fair argument. He can have that position, but he's got to stop lying. And the thing is, like, shifting the conversation to social justice is letting Ralph and the alt-right win. Now, it doesn't matter what happens to Sargon and all the other content creators leaving Patreon for some free speech alternative, because either this fails and the moderate right-wing YouTube scene falls even quicker, and they have less people to oppose them, or they find an alternative, and that gives these alt-righters just as much right to throw around racial slurs and engage in harassment as they like, without fear of moderation. This is why the far-right YouTubers are hunting down the more moderate edgelords and right-wing YouTube. Because by hunting them down and forcing them further right, that fuels their agenda. You're doing their work for them by scapegoating the social justice warriors for this shit. And it only incentivizes them to do it more to you. You think you're fighting, like, the harassment that's occurring to you from the far right by trying to get rid of all of the content moderation on social media, but that's not going to change. All it's going to do is just make the internet culture worse and worse and worse. And that part is annoying, but that's pretty much par for the course when it comes to dealing with alt-righters, and especially Sargon. The little opposition he does present against them feels too little too late, and he's going to be paying the price for that. Literally this time. But that would be one thing. What really gets me is how Sargon gets banned because the alt-righters organised to snitch on him, but for some reason, even worse people aren't banned on Patreon. Here's Black Pigeon Speaks, a far-right YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Yeah, and he's a serial plagiarist.
And when you download the subtitles of those videos and check them with a plagiarism checker, you will notice why. The contents of his videos are sometimes not his. The Amerimex future of the United States is in large parts verbatim taken from an article by Samuel P. Huntington.
The U.S. was created in the 17th and 18th centuries by settlers who were overwhelmingly white British Protestants. Their values, institutions, and culture provided the foundation for and shaped the development of the United States up to the present day. And the large majority of Americans see creed as a crucial part of their national identity.
Loads of his videos are just ripped entirely from articles online. And he passes off this work as his own. Here's also a segment of a video I did on Ethan Ralph, sped up a little bit because there's a lot of information on here.
This also resulted into Ralph Retort's channel getting removed, which I hate because why?
Why? That's actually quite a good question. I mean, for one, I personally think fucking with a children's charity to generate online controversy is enough to have him taken off. And it was enough for YouTube, but maybe it's not enough for you. Maybe it's not enough for you, dear viewer, either. Well, here's a quick crash course in some of the stuff he's done. I exposed his Discord server engaging in false flagging campaigns of his critics. And in response, he didn't ban the flaggers, he had them make burner accounts with temporary emails, so he was basically providing cover for them. And then he spent the next 15 kill streams whinging about me, and digging into my mum's social media, because harassing the families of YouTubers who criticise you is totally not against the terms of service. The guy is heavily chummy with doxers, including Wild Goose, who doxed Sargon of a can, and Ebola Serial, who's one of his mutuals, who doxed Krabs and T's mum, along with spending his time threatening young women with rape via knife. His Discord buddies were also digging into the families of other YouTubers too, such as Mundane Matt's wife. There's regularly doxing, false flagging ops in his chat, which when someone informed him of, he blocked them. And that's just in the past couple months. He's been at this for years. This guy is engaging in borderline criminal harassment of YouTubers to either get them on his show or to shut them up. Even if, according to his Discord server, that means driving them to suicide. Or making fun of YouTubers for having stillborns. Ethan Ralph is a man who does not deserve a platform. He's not just regularly breaking TOS on every site he uses, he's also probably also breaking his parole. Did I mention he's on parole for assaulting a police officer? See, Ralph throws around racial slurs all the time on his kill stream, and engages in borderline criminal harassment of people along with trying to fuck with the charity for clicks and views. But his Patreon is still up. There was a Wall Street Journal article about this. Why is no one talking about this? Here's Mr. Metokur, who also throws around racial slurs constantly. Here's a timestamp to where he says it in a video. And you can probably find it all on his archived streams. He regularly lies about and harasses YouTubers, digs into forum posts to make fun of their sexual habits. Oh, he outed a bisexual guy. Oh, and when he retweets people's docs, they end up getting swatted.
Well, yeah, to answer your question, I don't know any of these fucking people. I thought it was funny, so I retweeted it, and that was the end of it. Fucking 5 days ago.
Now people are, I guess, like, some people saw it, or they saw that you retweeted it, and now people, like, from all the different Discords in R9K are fucking with him regularly. Now the police are there, and he said that he's just constantly moving around because they can't arrest him or SWAT him or do anything to him if he's not home.
Yeah, who would have put it out there that this guy was involved with the suicide to the point where the guy's getting swatted there, Zeno?
Apparently, according to him, Mr. Metokur identified him as the person that did it, even though he hasn't gone by RICO in quite some time.
So Mr. Metokur is involved in some people getting swatted. That's interesting.
Why are these people allowed on? Because they go after targets that can't or won't fight back. These people aren't worried about being mass reported because they're so toxic. Lefties who actually go around reporting people are scared to go after them. And they are far right enough that alt-right false flaggers like their content and don't flag it. Being a toxic extremist with a group of people harassing everyone is protection from being taken down on these sites. They're still up, not despite breaking TOS, but because of it. So at the end of the day, the real tragedy of all of this is that the people who flagged Sargon, they fucking won.